Hi again then guys, and welcome to yet another installment of Beards and Cars here on the channel. This is, for those who are perhaps new to the series, more of a podcast style layout where we discuss things that could be more tangentially related to the channel or YouTube or Gran Turismo Sport in particular on this occasion. And as always, all of the timestamps of the discussion points, or the main points at least, are always in the description if you want to jump around through the video. Or maybe you don't have time to watch the whole thing. Now, in this particular pick, I wanted to continue on from some of the other Gran Turismo Sport-related discussions which we've been having, because in the past we've talked about things all over the place, but in recent weeks we've focused in more on stuff like Group X, or the kind of camera that I use in the game, or various other specifically Gran Turismo Sport-related topics. And I wanted to keep that going with something that I referenced earlier on in the week in one of my reviews. I can't remember what review it was, it may have not even been for Gran Turismo Sport, but I was discussing secret cars, unlockable cars, special cars, these cars which are typically outlined by a silhouette or covered with a cloth or a tarp of some kind, in various, especially old school racing games like from the PS1 era, even some on the PS2 era as well. But this is something which is almost like a lost art within the world of racing games, and it's something which I wanted to get the thoughts of you guys on as well, because we have a number of in-depth discussions with opposing points of view sometimes, like we had about self-driving cars or Group X on Gran Turismo Sport. Now personally, I'm a huge fan of the concept of having secret cars, cars which don't even have a price or a name or any specifications in a dealership. Maybe it's not even in a dealership, you can't see the car at all. And for those who are maybe much newer to the world of racing games, maybe Gran Turismo Sport is your first entry into the franchise, maybe Forza 7 is your first entry, maybe you're just a younger player who hasn't been on games for that long, and the PS1 is before your time, perhaps. That's a fair point, maybe even the PS2 is before your time. You've got to start somewhere, of course. So if you're not familiar with this concept, basically this was, as I said, especially on the PS1 and the PS2 and the Xbox equivalents as well, you would have a car in a dealership sometimes on a game like Tokka, for instance, I believe had it. Gran Turismo would have it in more of a totally hidden sort of way, such as on Gran Turismo 2 or in Gran Turismo 3, you'd have, in a very similar way to Gran Turismo Sport, 4 vehicles rotating after you've won a race, and the 4 cars would be silhouettes or covered up, and then you'd only be told which one you'd won when it had swiveled down, given you the car, and then it would shine up brighter or take off the tarp and show you what you'd won. Again, Gran Turismo Sport is very reminiscent of that, with the 4 cars that rotate, and then you win one of them. Now that's cool, I think. I like that they brought that back in Gran Turismo Sport, but I like it when they go further than that, because although they are secret, they're not really, because you can buy all of the cars in the game if you just have enough cash. So that kind of defeats the point of the secrecy when you can just tell what they are anyway. What I'm talking about is stuff where there's no name or anything for the vehicle. It's just a blacked out silhouette with nothing else, no information, and maybe like a question mark on the car. That's how old school games used to do it. And I used to love that because, and this is the main impetus of this discussion, it's not just about reminiscing, it's about what the benefits of that were, because it does go way beyond just being something cool to have in a game. There are plenty of cool things to have in games that I wouldn't necessarily like to see come back, and others which I would. Now, one of the benefits of this one is that it gives you something to work towards. Because nowadays, if you look at the current culture of gaming, be it racing games or any form of game really, we've shifted cultures. That's why stuff like hidden cars aren't really featured anymore. Because that's not the climate of current games. And that's a shame. And it's basically because, at least from what I've seen, people don't have patience anymore. People have no patience to work towards things. They want everything now. They want to buy their way to success instead of earning it. Stuff like, well, in fact, outside of the gaming world, you've got stuff like buying subscribers, buying followers, buying even fake bots just to have numbers on your account on Twitter or Instagram or Facebook or whatever. Personally, I've always considered that to be a very pathetic thing to do. But of course, there are people who have businesses doing that, they're happy with it, there are people who use the service, and I guess they're happy with it. Personally, I'd feel pretty bad about doing that myself, but obviously they don't. And again, it's this whole culture of wanting everything right now. I don't want to wait for anything. And that's kind of an issue with tech as well, because tech is becoming so fast that we're getting accustomed to having everything that we want immediately or throwing a tantrum about it. And of course, I myself am guilty of this in various ways. For people, for instance, I have far more patience in real life with other people than I do with technology. You guys who have been around on the channel, not necessarily since day one, but since the real early days, say like 1,000 subs or less, and even more recently actually in some cases, you can probably still remember the multiple occasions where I've had to release videos on this channel about my laptop breaking or a computer breaking or having to repair it. Sometimes because, well actually always because it's malfunctioned, but sometimes compounded by me also smashing the thing to pieces, which doesn't generally help. Now, knowing that it doesn't help doesn't stop me from doing it, because, and this goes back to what I said, I have much more patience with people than I do with machines. But the difference is, the reason why I personally don't have patience with technology these days, and this goes out much further than just secret cars, but that's kind of an entry point into this argument, is the current culture not just of wanting everything now, but also the way that manufacturers are responding to that culture, I think is unacceptable. But the problem is, just like with YouTube and Google and people not really getting anything done about it because they either can't or won't, just like that with businesses such as Apple, Microsoft, Sony, you get these businesses who are big enough not to care anymore. They are going to get sales either way, so they don't care about customer service. For instance, I use an iPhone. It's not the latest one. I still use a 5S. I couldn't care less about having the latest one as long as the one that I've got works. It does what I need it to do, and I'll upgrade when the contract runs out. That is fine for me. I couldn't care less about having the latest app version or the latest camera tech. Is it nice to have that? Of course. Could I afford that? Of course. Do I care to? No, because I'm not a tech head. I have always been the kind of person who uses technology, be it a console, a computer, a phone, whatever, even a vehicle. I use it as a means to an end. To me, it's not about the tech. It's about what I can do with the tech. As soon as the tech stops serving its purpose, I get angry real fast. And that ties into what I was saying earlier, because the reason why I get angry isn't because I can't have it now and I want it now and I want it now, give it to me now, I'm going to throw a tantrum, which is probably what you'd assume it is, but for me that's not the case. For me what it is I expect things which I have paid hundreds of pounds for to work. Now I know that's a very old-fashioned way of thinking, which many people don't seem to care about these days, but I actually like it when the technology that I've paid hundreds of pounds for does the job that I purchased it for. And that's becoming kind of an alien concept, especially for younger people again who have grown up in an era where Apple dominates certain markets. If they're not the biggest phone seller in the world, I haven't checked the figures, but they've got to be up there with stuff like Samsung, HTC, various others. But the thing is, it's not like you can pick another brand instead. They've all got their issues. Samsungs will melt your face off. iPhones will just screw you over with every new phone. I'm sure HTC has their issues as well. I know that the Windows Phone does. And it's not just phones, it's all technology. And it makes me so annoyed. In fact, it's way beyond annoyed. Sometimes I have felt that if I were in the room with customer support, I would kill them. And I don't mean that as a joke. I would physically kill the person who is representing the company. Because if you choose to represent a company who is making a deliberate choice to screw over millions of people, why do you even deserve to live? As far as I'm concerned, you don't. Now, of course, the fact that they're on the other end of a phone is very beneficial for them, even though they're so thick-skulled, Neanderthal-type people that they don't know that that's benefiting for them. And of course, this is getting into a rant again, but there you go. So again, this all comes back to like the secret car thing. It's not just this simple concept. once you start thinking about these things, if you want to, you can go much further. And it really does feed into this whole culture that we're in. And it's not a case of the good old days. There's no such thing as the good old days. Every era has its problems. They just happen to be different. Look at back in the day. People say the good old days of the 40s, 50s, 60s. Oh, you mean the World War days? You mean the rationing days? You mean the thalidomide making babies with flippers instead of arms and legs days? Yeah, those good old days. There's no such thing as good old days. Every generation has its own issues, and we just happen to only focus on the ones which are happening right now and have a rose-tinted view of the past. I don't have a rose-tinted view of the past because every phone I've ever owned has had issues. I've owned a Razor, I've owned that brick Nokia, whatever that was called back in the day. I've owned flip phones, I've owned iPhones, I've had a number of iPhones. I've never tried the Galaxy, but I don't particularly care to have a skin graft after I make a call. I've never tried a HTC, but I'm sure, as I said, that they all have their own issues. They're bound to. They have no reason not to, because people will continue to buy them. And the reason why I will probably get another iPhone isn't because of any kind of brand loyalty. Screw Apple, as far as I'm concerned. If they all died in a fire, I wouldn't lose a wink of sleep. I just want my money back from the warranty. But this culture that we're in, it makes it very difficult to get stuff done, I think. And I don't know if this is the case for you guys as well, because if any of you have a job, and of course this will apply more for the older members of the audience, if you have a job where you work in some kind of, say, heavy machinery industry or technological industry, maybe like me, you're trained as a mechanic, maybe you work in a garage, maybe you work on a lathe or something like that, maybe you're an electrician or a plumber, the tools that you use, I'm sure that you have noticed ways in which they've gotten worse over the years. The quality is down, the pricing is up, the warranties are shorter. But in those services at the same time, the kind of stuff which you use in a garage is actually still, or at least when I was back in college, was still really good quality in comparison to everything else. And why is that the case? Because it has to be. Mechanics, garages, car manufacturers will not accept anything less than the best. And why is that accepted by those people manufacturing the tools? Because those saying it have enough power. Yet when it's the public, when it's us, the consumer, saying that we want better quality, no one listens. Why? Because they don't have to. The lemmings will still buy the product, we all still buy the product, or we just choose a different name, which is essentially all one big company. It might as well be, with just different names, different faces that rotate as to which one you want to see. And of course it's not one big company, but you know, it may as well be. They operate in a very similar way, because there's literally no reason for any one company to be better. They don't need to be. They're all just as bad, so it's all about the profit. And of course business is about profit. That's good business. But here's the problem. And I think this is one of the core issues, if not the core issue, that many businesses have forgotten. And this goes for YouTube as well. Businesses have forgotten, or maybe they never had it in the first place, I don't know, but there is something that's more important than profit. And that is feeling from the customer and brand loyalty. Because you could make the best product in the world, but if you don't have good customer service, or if you don't have customer loyalty, or if you discriminate against customers or make them feel as if they're not really worth being there at all, that's not a good way to run a business like that. Now, there's a difference between that and a customer who's being just blatantly aggressive towards the company or looking for something to complain about. But for those who actually are interested, for instance, I've got a friend who wanted to buy, I think it was an Audi. He was looking to get a new car. He went into the Audi dealership and they treated him like dirt because he'd come from work and he wasn't dressed in a suit or something like that. The customer service was so bad that he ended up buying a BMW instead. That is the power of customer service. That's the power of a brand image. And a brand image is infinitely more important than a profit. Because Audi made no profit that day because they had no thought or at least the person representing Audi, had no thought to how the customer should see the company through them. And that's the same issue that these people who work for Apple have, who work for Samsung, whoever the case may be. They view it as just a job. They don't represent the company, because if they did actually think about it, and if they had any kind of moral compass, you would never work for these companies. Now, of course, you can always say, well, you've got to find work somewhere. Of course you have. But that doesn't mean that you've got to throw your soul behind the company as well, as many of these people seem to, selling you these products as if you need them to live. You don't need any of them. They just help with things. And again, that just gets to me when you see these people who are, they're not blind to it, they see it and they still choose to do it. They choose to support these companies who, they'll screw them over just as quickly as they will the public. You're useful right up until you're not, and then as soon as you're not, they'll throw you away. So I guess this discussion, and I'm sure there'll be thoughts either way on this one about a lot of different subjects that we've discussed here, but I think it's a discussion which, it kind of needs to happen, but at the same time, it's one which people don't like having. I myself don't necessarily like having this discussion that often, because it's the kind of discussion where, regardless of your age and regardless of whether or not you have a lot of money or a little or a job or don't, or have the latest tech or older tech, you can always relate to this, because we all use tech on some level, be it a wristwatch up to a flying car, if that was possible. Tech applies to everything these days. So on whatever level, you can see the differences in tech and how worse things have got. As I said before, my gaming chair, it's not a gaming chair. It's an armchair from the Victorian era, and it's still not broken, because things were made properly back then. That is the only aspect of the so-called good old days which I would agree with, because back then, going back to what I said earlier, about mechanics and garages holding the tool companies to such a high standard that they have to make the tools good. Likewise, people back then making chairs or furniture or those years equivalent to the highest technology, which would be like a horse and cart of some kind, that kind of stuff, they didn't have an option of whether or not to make those things as well as they could. If they didn't, they'd probably be put in prison by whoever the rich person was they were making it for, or be killed by the king, or whatever the case was. It was a necessity. Whereas nowadays, the roles have completely reversed. It's gone from a consumer-dictated society to a seller-dictated society, so that they can do whatever they want and we'll just keep buying it. And I think that's a shame, because as long as there are no companies who are willing to be better, that's just going to continue, because they've got no reason to be better. And that's why whenever I discuss with my dad, we occasionally talk about a competitor to YouTube coming along, a genuine competitor who outdoes them. If that ever happened, and of course that would take a huge amount of effort, a huge amount of money, and it probably will never happen, but if that did happen, if you had a company which did the same thing but with better service and better communication with creators, they would outdo YouTube in a heartbeat, because people want to support a company that makes them feel needed and wanted. Not the current scenario of YouTube, which is creators are told nothing, the audience is completely in the dark, videos get demonetized for no reason, they have these arbitrary rules about what is and isn't allowed. Even at the moment on my laptop, on the subject of tech again, I'm running Windows 10. I couldn't particularly care less what kind of Windows I'm running as long as it works, but I'm currently having issues with the laptop because it keeps forcing the laptop to do updates which I don't want. So as soon as the updates are fitted, I remove them and restore the computer to what it was before, because this update slows down my computer every single time. I then went behind the back of the computer, went into the services, not disconnected, what's the term that I'm trying to think of? Basically blocked it from happening at its core, and the computer still overrides that, turns it back on again, and does updates. That's not acceptable. What kind of customer service is that? The computer is in effect being programmed to override the customer's wishes. When did we reach this point? When did technology become more about what the company wants than what you want? Well, the reality is that's always been the case, but it was never so blatant before. And I think that's why it annoys me more than anything else, because it's thrown in your face. They slap you across the face with the fact that you can't do anything about it. Apple slaps you across the face with their arrogant, belligerent customer service who say things like, "Oh, have you tried using battery life saving settings? Have you tried getting a clue, you thick-skulled Neanderthals on the end of the phone? No, I haven't tried using apps to save battery life. I haven't tried turning off roaming Wi-Fi. And you know why? Because it makes no difference. Because when I leave the house with 100% battery, watch one YouTube video and then have 20% left, after 8 minutes, because of iOS 11, no, I'm not going to try using your stupid update settings and your battery life-saving settings. It's ridiculous. And as I said, I have much more patience with people than I do with tech. When it comes to tech, it either works or it serves me no purpose. And the moment it doesn't serve its purpose, it's as good as dead to me, basically. And that's why I tend to get too angry with my tech. Thankfully, I don't get that way with people, because if I did, then I probably wouldn't be making this video right now, or at least I'd be making it from a cell instead of a house. But yeah, it's a discussion which I think people have all the time. It's not as much a YouTube discussion, I don't think. It's more just stuff that you talk about in your own family or with friends. Maybe it doesn't bother some of you guys, but I think most of us it probably does. And I think for most people it bothers you in some way, at least, because it's one of those issues that has its tendrils in so many parts of your life and society that you're bound to be affected by it somehow, even if you haven't really thought about it. But I guess that's it for this discussion. Kind of a discussion, kind of a rant, but sometimes you just got to get that stuff out there. So, of course, as usual, if you would like to talk about certain things, discuss certain things, as I said, it doesn't have to be directly related to a game or to YouTube, then, yeah, slap them down below. But that's it for this pick. Of course, I'll see you guys next week. Probably a little bit less irate, but who knows what could happen by then. So for now, as always, thanks for watching.